Oh my gosh. I'm so mad. It just ended without any warrant. I mean, it did tell me I had 50 something seconds, but I still had 50 something seconds to go. I had thoughts, I had things. I'm so mad that it just did that. Here, let me get Kaisha back in here. I'm so sorry, guys. It just ended on me. Everyone who's been waiting, I'm so sorry. I know we're going like so way out of time, but we've just got so much good stuff going on. Sorry, Kaisha. Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
it's okay. I knew as soon as you said it, I was like, dang, it's been a minute.
It has. I just can't believe where the time went. It said 55 seconds though. I'm mad because I had 55 seconds and it just shut me off. Anyways, as I was saying, because now I've got all the time in the world. When you're dealing with kids who are potentially going to be growing up in a predominantly white area, you have to be able to be willing to sit down and have these open, honest conversations. And I know parents are going to get like about certain things, but you have to, because I know, like my mom, if I told my mother half the things that I heard when I was at SCS, I know like
Crazy.
there would be no more SCS.
Correct.
Like, and it was because I knew, and I was scared to tell her because I knew it was just bad.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you can open up like a safe space for your kids to be able to talk to you and don't overreact and just kind of like take a beat, let them say their piece and then help them navigate how to deal with those issues. I think that definitely helps
Yeah,
with them being able to express themselves, one, and being able to be comfortable in their skin and stand up for what's accurate.
for sure.
So sorry guys, thank you for coming back. I'm so sorry.
Surprised to
I
see so many people that I know.
I know, it's great. And let me just shout out Bianca. Bianca, I know it is past your bedtime and you are still here. And I am so thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Um gosh, I can't believe you shut me off. Anyways, so that being said, because I have like two more people that I want to get on here.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think, and this is a huge question that you that you might not be able to answer in
Mm-hmm.
this situation, but as a young person, what are some ways that people can begin to take action to start changing just start changing things?
Educate yourself. First of all, I know that's been said every single time people have been on tonight, but that's because it's important. Educate yourself.
Educate, yep.
And um I mean, I feel like definitely something that's helped me a lot, at least to solidify how I feel about things, is to not that that politics are like what's it called binary, like they shouldn't be, but like I've definitely spent time, wanted and unwanted, talking to people on the other side. Hi Lynn, I'm happy to see you here. But yeah, I feel like that's definitely helped me to figure out how I feel about things. And like I know that that's not for everybody because it was not for me. And like I said, a lot of it was unwanted time. But when you're at a PWI, you don't really, you don't really have many options. Um, so yeah, I mean, just like, not like just talk to people, because some people, like, you need to obviously use discernment and be wise about what you're taking in, but talking to people and educating yourself, like, there are so many resources. If you need resources, DM me. If I know you personally, you don't need to pay me. If I don't know you, maybe 50 cents to my Venmo or something. I'm not going to go crazy and charge you because I'm still 21. Um,
She's
so,
struggling. She's struggling.
you know, but yeah, I don't know. I also feel like it is important for me to emphasize because I know like everything that Tay said was good and he's so cool and I'm going to listen to his music and he's going to be the only country artist that I listen to actively.
He's
Um,
the only one I listen to, except Shania
but,
Twain. Gotta love Shania.
but I will say that it is not, I personally do not feel as though it is a person of color's job, a black person, Asian people. I don't think it's any of our jobs to educate white people.
Mm.
And I believe that very firmly as someone who has been doing it without pay since 2012. It is not my job unless you pay me. That's why I know, like, it's funny that I'm like, send me an invoice, give me money for it. But I'm being serious. Like, this, like, I don't think people understand how taxing it is and how much actual effort it takes for most people.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, I feel like it's important to educate yourself, and if you really need help, like, I'm sure someone will point you in the right direction. I will at least give you a shove to the right side of the internet. um
Right.
and that goes back to what I was saying earlier, like, you were asking how I feel. I'm tired. People have been in my DMs all week being like, what should I do? Can you, like, I'm so sorry. For, huh? Like, I'm just tired.
I agree. I'm with you on 1,000% on that. I mean, I see what Tay was trying to
Yeah,
say. The fact that it's gonna need to be a group effort at
absolutely.
some point, but I don't think we're at that point yet.
And I also don't think it's for everyone. I feel like, because I was like, oh, I'm going to go into racial reconciliation ministry because I like talking about race. But I got tired so fast. And that was just as a theology major at a college. I got so tired of even writing about it.
Mm.
One thing
Hmm.
I used to love to do, I am now exhausted because people are like, oh, can you write this article about this? Can you talk about the difference between racism and prejudice? Without getting paid?
Right. And I think it's important for, and this is just coming from someone who people never, this is something I always struggle with. People always ask me questions that is very easy to Google. And it's like, no matter where I'm at, it's like, oh, Lonnie, what's this? And what time's the service start? And da 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 da. And I'd be like, did you check? Did you look at the site? Did you look at Google? Did you check this? Where, and like when I worked at my last job, Monty, where's the post-its? Did you look where I normally put the post-it? Like, it was a constant situation. Sorry, that was a whole other thing. But I think for my white friends and family that are watching here, before you go and say, hey, black person, tell me what to do, Google it. I promise you.
But
I literally Googled the other day
Google's
how
crazy.
to be anti-racist. Thousands of articles came up. And I know that you might be thinking, oh, I want to make sure it's good. Da, da, da. I guarantee you it's fine.
It's usually okay.
If you say, I guarantee you there's not a KKK person out there who's posing as an anti-racist who's going to tell you to say the wrong thing. That's not going to
Like,
happen.
work.
It's too much work. It's too much work. So I just say, before you go and ask your black friend or whatever, just Google it. Give yourself a little bit of a foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Look up things like, what is color blindness? What is systematic racism? How can I be anti-racist? You can read books called like White Fragility. That's a book I think
Yeah.
every white person should read. White Fragility. I will also post this after that. There's lots of things that you can just plainly Google. And once you have those foundations, then perhaps maybe if you want to reach out to someone that you know. But again, as I said before, it is not the black person's obligation to talk to you about it, to answer you about it, because again, we're all trying to heal. And as a black person, I might need to put up a boundary. Say,
Yeah.
hey, I'm not ready to talk about this with you
Yeah.
yet. And that's okay. And you don't need to get offended or whatever. Just, keep it moving, whatever. Because again, not just one black person is not the mouthpiece for all black people. And yes, like, I am a person that I don't mind having conversations, but Kaija might not be the person to do that. And it's not, that's just how it is. And find different black people to talk to. Find more black friends. Find more Latino or Latina friends. Like, find other people. Because if you only have one black friend,
It's your own fault.
you need to not.
You need to fault, realistically. Like I wrote a whole, again, the papers. I wrote a whole paper about this, about how, because for the most part, people who only have 1 to 2 black friends, it's because they are intentionally not putting themselves in the situations where they can even meet black people. And on top of that, they're uncomfortable around black people. And so, I'm sorry, my cat is in the corner being weird. But like, I don't know, like, you can do it. I believe in you. Try a little harder. But
It's true. It's true. All right, one last question for
yes.
what is, and I guess it's just going into what we were talking about before. Like, what is one resource you would recommend to either to just everybody to learn more about race and relations and um, reconciliation and all that good stuff?
Um, all right, I'm gonna try to like do 5 really quick. So the first one would be Trouble I've Seen by Drew Hart. It's a really good book,
Ooh,
and
I have.
especially for Christians who are trying to figure out how to even think about starting a race conversation. That's the book for you. Um, 1 or 2, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together at the Lunch Table is really good.
That's a good one.
Look, don't remember who writes it, but I talk about it at least twice a day. 3, the Liturgist podcast is just good for everything in general. I will send you specific links to episodes that have changed my life. 3, Jude 3 project in general as a whole program project thing, really good if you're interested in hearing about perspective of like black theology and things like that. And 5, generally Google. Like that's usually my 5th one is Google. Realistically, if you need more, you will help you the best that I can. But yeah, yes, Nancy. See, Nancy always knows.
Nancy knows what's
Nancy
up.
always knows.
Again, if you guys missed it before, Nancy is open to answering any questions for our white friends and family who have questions on being a white person in this whole situation, and she can give you great resources.
She's
Her
great. Love.
amazing. All right. Well, Kaisha, thank you so much. I'm sorry that it was so late.
No, it's okay.
Um,
Yep. Anyways,
I appreciate you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for sharing your heart and
it's
sharing your
me.
joy and your light. And I will have you on soon for sure. Okay?
Okay,
Tell Neil I said hey.
I will.
Okay, love you.
Love you too.
All right, guys. Okay. I'm gonna have one more person on, and I'm so sorry. It has gone a lot later than I thought. I should have known. I knew this was gonna happen. I'm gonna bring on Ashlyn. I know she's still here. Wanda, I promise you the next Rona Rex next week, you're gonna be on. No, no holds bar. We're going in, me and you. But I'm gonna bring on Ashlyn. I don't know if Brian is with her, but I'm so sorry, Wanda. I don't want people here for like 400 years. I'm sorry. But I'm gonna bring on Ashlyn really quick. Um, is she still here? Did she fall asleep? Let me see. Guys, this has been really, really good. I'm just so thankful that you guys are staying up and staying with us. I don't know if she's still here. She was just here. What's going on? Let me see. Oh, there she is. View. Go live. Thank you so much for being here. I can't believe we still have all these people still. Oh my goodness. Hey
I'm
girl.
here.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you. So, guys, this is my friend Ashlyn. I went to school with her many moons ago when we were at SCS. I don't
Yeah.
even know where to start. Ashlyn, why don't you just give a little introduction of yourself, what you do, all the things.
So first, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on here, and Tay and Brittany and Kaija and Mentha. You guys are awesome, and it's been so encouraging to listen to what you have to say, and it's been educational, and I just really appreciate that so much. You guys did a great job, so thanks. So
Oh. Thank you.
Yes. Um, as Imani said, we went to school together. So this school that has come up a couple of times now, which will probably factor into the conversation somewhat as far as my journey with this topic. So I'm 29 and I am a teacher, which is also an interesting perspective. I studied history and political science, and so I actually teach high school history in Albany High School. So that is just a little bit about me. Does
Oh,
that?
that's great. I'm so excited. So, again, the question I've been asking the past few weeks, even the past few years, because I know that you are like on the dial of everything that's been going on. What has been your take on everything? Your perspective? Have you been feeling? What's been going on in your head?
Yeah. So I feel like it's such a huge range of emotions that vary from being super angry, being super disappointed, being super frustrated, being embarrassed, um, feeling guilty and shame that this is what it takes for white people, the white church, to speak out. Because this isn't anything new. This is something that's been going on and on and on and on. So there's all of those feelings wrapped into one. Um, but I feel like the strongest emotion is like anger, like that righteous anger that has to be channeled. Um, and I felt like a lot of disappointment in
Mm,
in myself and in other people that I feel like we should have been and need to be, doing more.
mm, mm. That, and I think because Mentha was talking about embarrassment and how that's deep and how she never thought of that. Like, can you kind of elaborate on that? Like, what has brought forth that emotion in you?
So, can I give a little background to this
Sure.
answer?
Yeah.
So, I feel like this is something that I would not have been able to articulate with my own words even a couple of years ago. So, the book White Fragility, and I like had this next to me. I'm like, if you haven't read it, you need to read it. It basically highlights for white people the fact that, racism isn't something that you are or are not. Racism is a system, and you are socialized as white. Like I was socialized as white, and
Mm,
therefore I don't get to say, oh no, like I don't have any, like, no, it's been ingrained in whiteness, which is what, white people inhibit in this country. And so in the book, it really wants you to accept the fact that it's not if you're racist, but it's how. And how
wow.
that's a really difficult concept for white people, especially to swallow. And she talks about this idea of white fragility and white equilibrium. Like white people typically can only talk about things, race related things, in a way that makes them comfortable until they reach a limit or under their terms. And once that equilibrium is no longer in balance, they become very fragile.
Mm,
Um, because it's associated with feelings of guilt and embarrassment and shame. And so that question, like, explain embarrassment, it's the knowing association with this white supremacist generational systemic system, and admitting that it has propelled me while it has dehumanized and oppressed other people. And that's shameful, it's embarrassing, it's disappointing.
mm.
And so I guess that provides some context and just some ways to kind of explain why I use that word.
Wow. Wow. That is huge. Just that whole concept of it's not if I'm racist, it's just how I'm racist. And I think that's just, I mean, I'm not a white person, so I can't speak to this, but I think it's a huge like eye opener to think like, wow, this is just ingrained in my upbringing and who I am, and not even like realizing the things that I might have predispositioned in my head. And I think for, I guess my question, I kind of asked the same question to Brittany, was like, what was your aha quote unquote moment when you realize like, one, I have privilege as a white person, and then two, recognizing how the people of color were treated in this country and the systematic racism and all that stuff. Like when was that moment for you?
Yeah. So for me, it was a spectrum. So going back to, like a lot of white people, myself included, we make ourselves feel better by saying, like, I'm not overtly racist. I don't do what those people do. And so the book really talks about that. That is a kind of makes us feel better, right? Because we judge it with this good, bad binary that she talks about. And it's like, no, just because it's not those overt things doesn't mean that these layered, even subconscious other things don't exist. So to answer your question directly, it was a spectrum for me. So I went to the same school that you went to, which is predominantly, exclusively white, really. And so I grew up in a divorced household, and I had one side of the family that was very conservative evangelical, and another side of the family that was more Catholic and moderate, I guess you would say. So I had some different exposures, but not much at all. And then I was walking into a space where everybody looked like me, and everybody believed how I had been told to believe. And that's another thing, there was no diversity present whatsoever. And it was almost as if your political leanings were synonymous with your salvation. And so to question the status quo, or to question the theology that was being taught, almost made you like, are you really saved? Like you were like an outlier and an outcast, And so you just didn't really do that, especially me as a white person. I blended right in, like with what everybody was saying, what everybody was doing, And so I don't really think I had a major aha moment until I graduated and went to college. And then I started to study history and study the world through a much broader lens that didn't have this narrow, colonizer Christianity theology, which really is what it had been, it is really what I had been exposed to. Sort of this hierarchical religion. Do you do the right thing? Do you believe the right things? With really no regard for the reality of what Christianity, the whitewashed version of Christianity, brought to this country. And then I got to college, I'm like, oh my God.
Right.
Like, this is completely different. And so that was like the first real aha moment. It's not like, in earlier years, I didn't recognize that there were disparities and that there were inequalities. But you know what, Imani, it was never spoken about. It was never spoken to. It was never explained. And so I think what ends up happening, and that embarrassment comes in here again, is like, you just believe that was the way that it was. Like, this is just how the world is, because nobody intentionally spoke to it. So then college was that real aha moment. I had some awesome professors, many of whom that I still keep in contact with today. So that education piece is huge. And then going into teaching was another major, major aha moment. And so I knew I wanted to teach history. I knew I wanted to teach locally. And so I started teaching middle school in Albany in an all boys charter school. And they were, I thank God that that was my first teaching placement, because I learned so much from that principal, who was a believer, by the way, not just the principal of a school, but also a believer. And about inequity and inequality and all of these things that nobody had ever talked about in my entire life.
Wow.
And then I'm having to reconcile, I profess Christianity and I don't even know about these things. And the people that I've been learning from that also profess this don't talk about these things. And so that really like stirred in me another aha moment. And just being so broken and so disappointed for what this reality was that I was just not exposed to or immersed in. And then I just feel along the course of my teaching career, more and more aha moments have happened. And I've had to be sure to check myself as they're happening to make sure that my motives, my understanding are in the right place, you know, because what can happen is you don't know any of that. You're not exposed to it. You're not taught. And then you're dropped in it and you turn into wanting to have this like savior complex. Well, I'm going to come in and I'm going to fix everything. And it's not about that. It's about educating. It's about understanding. It's about, you know, seeking justice, which you talked about Dr. Anita Phillips last night. And she was so awesome. She said, you know what, like, essentially, I'm paraphrasing here. Christians like to talk about this Christian worldview. And the Christian worldview is way easier than we make it. It's confess with your mouth, Jesus is Lord, believe that he died and rose again, and love God and love others as much as you love yourself. That's the Christian worldview.
Right.
But what we've done is we have taken our human worldviews and our humanity, and we've tried to confine our faith and our Christianity within that. And that's why we've gone so wrong.
Right.
And then I'm kind of getting off the rails here, but from charter school, I went to public school. And that was another aha moment. Because the overt racism, the covert racism that was present there was unlike, well, I shouldn't say it was unlike anything I'd ever seen, because what I grew up in was covert, but I just didn't have the awareness. I didn't have the vocabulary to be able to identify, articulate that. So that was another.
Oh no. Ah, what happened? We lost Ashlyn in a really good point. I don't know. Oh, here she is. She's back. Oh no, that scared me. I hope it works. Bye, Wanda. I'm so happy you were here. Here she is.
I don't know what I did.
I don't know what happened. You just got so passionate, it turned it off.
Sorry.
So you were talking about the covert racism in the charter school.
And in the I switched from charter to public, and more so, in the public school. And so these were just like aha after aha after aha moment. And then again, like the anger, the frustration, the sadness, and the guilt and the shame and the embarrassment that it had taken me so long to be more fully, and I'm still not fully, I'm learning, I'm educating myself, but more fully aware of this reality.
Wow. So, and I think you have a lot. I feel like your experience is not your like the only person, because I think a lot of my white friends that I have talked to, it's been like you said, like on a spectrum where, you know, thing after thing after thing just continues to open your mind to things. And I think that's why humility is so important, because you have to, it's a constant checking of yourself. It's a constant checking of like, why am I saying these things? Why do I believe these things? Like, where did this come from? And again, I don't think it's just a white person thing. I think this is just a life thing that people should be doing in general. But I think, again, with what you were saying about the ingrained racism that people are brought up with. It's something that you have to constantly be checking yourself on. So I appreciate you for doing that.
And you know what? Another thing too is, you know, like my black and brown friends are so patient because white people, whiteness is essentially saying, be patient and understanding with us while we unpack what you've been living with forever. And that's also like, you feel messed up saying that, you know?
Right.
So.
And it's hard too, because, and I mean, to Kaisha's point, you know, it's hard. Sometimes it's like, it's just tiring because it's like, I know for me, I think one of my frustrations recently with everything that's been going on is just the fact that it's like, I've been saying this. Like, it's like I've talked to my white friends about it. I've said, this is happening, or I've posted things. And it's so funny because, like, I always laugh because, like, if I post, like, a selfie, I'll get, like, 1 million likes. But if I say, oh, racism, then it's, like, 2 likes. And it's like, what are,
Facts.
I don't, it's just one of those things where it's like, what, I'm just, it's upsetting that it's taken this long for people to be like, oh, so this is a thing. And then at the same time, then it's like, now I'm getting bombarded with questions and, you know, which I appreciate. Thank you for, the action really does speak to me and I appreciate that. But at the same time, I kind of want to just shake people and be like, hello, this is what I was talking about before. Like,
and
I talk to you about it now.
I'm with you completely on that. And I think that's so important. Like you guys have said, I mean, Google, book. I brought this like stack of books that they're out there. And racism and what whiteness has constructed needs to be dismantled by white people because it's our problem.
Wow. Wow.
And it's not the job of you guys, of black and brown people, to fix our problem. And it goes back to that white equilibrium. There's that fragility. Like there's a whole chapter in here on white women's tears, you know, and how there's this fragility as soon as white people get out of as soon as whiteness rather gets out of equilibrium, gets out of their comfort. And it's, we have to look at it. We have to face it. You can't change something if you won't name what it is. You can't change something if you don't understand it. You know, and so white people have to get uncomfortable. They have to face the reality. We have to face the reality, and we have to dismantle it, especially as white Christians.
Wow. Right.
And you and I talked about that, I think it was yesterday, but any other time that we've talked about this issue as well. I said to Amani last night, the older I get, the more I'm reading in Romans right now. And I'm just like, white Christianity, white American Christianity, perhaps I should be more specific, really has to dismantle the traditional understanding that we've had of the gospel in order to understand the actual gospel at all.
Right.
Because we would have to abandon our, you know, judgmental, exclusionary, nationalistic, patriotic version that's been perpetuated to really understand what Jesus was about.
Woo, girl. That's so true. And again, we've talked about this. It's like, for you to say, I believe in this gospel, but then not to say anything about what's been going on in America with the injustices, not just what's been going on with the Black community, but the Latino community, the Native American community. Like, there's so much going on. And for you to just be silent on that, it's like, how have you read the Bible? Do you know who Jesus is? Because Jesus he called out stuff that was like, what? Like, mind-blowingly stuff. So it's like, how could you say that? And I think this brings up a good question that I haven't really asked many people, but what is your take on how the church has responded to all of this? Like, are you disappointed? Are you embarrassed? Are you upset? Do you like what's your thoughts on how the church has responded?
Yeah, I mean, historically, there's been minimal, if any, extremely impactful response, right? I mean, whether we want to admit it or not, this country was built upon a weaponized version of Christianity.
Wow.
That's just the fact. And so, if, like I said before, my belief is if that hasn't been actively dismantled, the church can't adequately address it. And I think that's why the church has not adequately addressed it to date.
Wow.
And I was talking to Brian about this. I said, social media is a game changer because it almost forces you to take a stance now. We've always conveniently turned our eyes and turned our backs. And now it's like even more in your face. I said, a lot of churches, white pastors especially, are taking a stand more now. And I'm taking a stand more now. I'm posting more now on social media than I have in the past. So I'm not judging that. I said, so it's a tough evaluation. Like, is it a good thing they're doing this? Yes, I think it is. The fact that it's taken this long, I think just lends itself to what white evangelicalism is rooted in.
Right.
And that still has to be explicitly addressed.
Right. No, I agree with you 1,000%. And I feel like it's just, I mean, you said it perfectly. You're like speaking like such truth and such facts. And I agree with you that social media has, like, you can't get away from it. Like, you can't get away from everything that's been going on. One of my thoughts is I've been praying, like, Lord, actually show people where there needs to be change. Because I always worry that it's like, are people posting this because everyone else is posting this and they don't want to look
Because
like,
it's trending.
because it's trending, because it's popular, because, oh my gosh, all the other pastors are posting, so I better post it?
Yeah.
Or is it like, no, I genuinely see that there's a problem and I want to change? And obviously you're going to have a little bit of both, of course, but I think now is the time, like, people really need to dig in and say, okay, but really, why is this wrong? And why haven't we been listening to our congregation members of color? And why, like, what's been the big deal? And especially like your whole point on, you've been saying so much, I'm like, I should write this down. Um, your whole point on everything just being, again, how Christianity is just so, it's just so in with everything else of this world. And it's like, how do we undo that? And I guess I mean, we're both still trying to answer this question, but how do you think that the church can truly, like, what's the best action that the church, in your opinion, should do now to make a bigger impact, or to actually support the Black community?
So I think it's going beyond just speaking out on the obvious that everybody knows is overtly so wrong. It's who's represented, who has a voice, what actionable steps are we taking to seek justice, ensure equity, all of those things. And that can't be done by just speaking out against something that is wrong.
Right.
It has to be done by, okay, now, and I talk about this in school all the time too, we've identified the problem. Now, what are the next steps that we're going to take that are actually going to treat the wound? And you can't treat the wound when you are still excluding and not including and not bringing different voices and faces to the table to come up with a solution. We need organization, we need leadership in order to actually take next steps that are going to bring the radical change that we need within the body. And I really, really enjoyed the podcast last night where it's talking about we are a body of believers and there's a gaping wound that's never been tended to ever.
Right. Right.
It's never been tended to. It's been brushed over at best.
Right.
So I think that obviously, as everybody has said, we need to pray. And then, you know, faith without works is dead. We need to take action. We can't just hide behind that we're praying. We need to take action. And we need to, especially white Christians, I think that we need to pray for humility. I think that we need to pray to put our pride aside, to have our eyes opened, our ears opened, our hearts opened. So like I said before, we can actually name this thing so we can start to change it.
Right. Right. Absolutely. I mean, it's such a deep topic, and I'm I'm watching the time, and I'm like, I don't want to keep you here all night.
I'm like, am I making sense or am I
No, you
rambling?
totally are. It's such a huge thing, and I think again, basically, and what you were saying is absolutely correct. You need to have people at the table to help change things, and I think more diverse leadership. I think, what we've been saying all night, listening, talking to people, like actually taking a step back, repenting, forgiving, we're all basically saying the same thing. It's just a matter of like people actually doing it. And it might not seem like a big deal, but those are huge steps. It's small steps make big impact when
And I
they're done.
also, adding on to that, and I'm keeping it real, we have church small groups, you know. I've never seen anything to host conversations specifically surrounding this topic. Here and there sprinkled, you know, maybe partnering with this church or hosting but not with any consistency, not
Right.
with any urgency. Like, this is an urgent issue. And so again, when you speak to like, how's the church done addressing this, you talk about the necessity of opening the conversation. Like, how can the church not be the place that's doing that? You know?
It's huge. And I think in general, the church ignores a lot of real life things. Not even talking about race, like talking about like sexuality and like real life sins that people are kind of are going through. And I think it's because I don't know if the church is scared. I don't know if the church is just, they don't want to talk about it, what have you. But the church, where it should be a safe place to talk about real life stuff, to talk about sin, to air out and be transparent, that's the one place that it's not happening. And that is a huge problem and a huge thing that I think leadership needs to take a look at, because it's like, how can we even, that's why the church is not effective anymore, or it hasn't even been effective, because it's only preaching to a certain type of person, and then it's trying to make these new Christians into this type of person, which doesn't look like Jesus at all. It just looks another another white male Christian.
And it's like, and shout out again to Dr. Anita Phillips from last night, but she talked about like, based on who is in leadership will reflect what is being focused on.
Right.
Or even what you've been, I don't know if you want to use the word indoctrinated with, or what you've been raised on, or what's been traditional to you will impact how you look at scripture as well.
Right.
So, you know, we as a church have come up with, you know, sins we're more comfortable with than others. And then there's certain sins we're not as comfortable with. We might talk about those a little bit more, because it goes to that lens through which we're looking at Christianity through, which isn't actually the gospel message, but it's how, oftentimes, let me not be too general here, but it's how can we fit this into the worldview of our comfort. And then when you overlap that with the worldview of whiteness,
Wow.
How messed up is that?
Right. It's just all of this. It's all of this extra, and it's not. This is not even what the gospel is. It's fair. It's a modern day Pharisee, but it's like it's white supremacy Pharisee, and that's just unfortunately that's where we're at. And
Yeah.
gosh, there's just so much. There's just so much. All right, and this is kind of not the last question, but second to last. Being an educator, what have you seen? Like, I guess, what have you seen in like just the disparity in different things? Like, and how have you been trying to kind of combat that in your classroom?
Yeah. So, man, this is like another topic, I'm super passionate about. The disparities in education are horrific. If you're not in it, the public education system especially, but then we can talk about how private education is another means of separation. There's no equality whatsoever. There's a movement for equity and for restoration, but it's really being done at the expense of real empowerment. Do you know what I'm saying? So essentially, we're looking at the symptoms and the impacts and the effects of systemic racism, which breeds poverty, which breeds all of these other things. We're seeing the symptoms of that, and we're not treating them in any real way.
Wow.
In any real way. Instead, what we're doing is we're basically lowering the bar so much that the message from the school system is, we expect this little of you because we don't think that you can.
Wow.
And that's not how it would be advertised, but that's what it is. It's a lowering of standards. It's a lowering of expectations rather than a real empowerment, which would allow our students to, meet their ultimate potential and success. So, man, education is a mess. So what am I trying to do in my classroom? Probably not enough. But I try to host conversations, and I've hosted more conversations this year than I had last year, and then I had the previous year. But hosting conversations, being really intentional about representation, being really intentional, especially I teach history, about the narrative that's being presented, making sure everybody's voice is heard, everybody's voice is represented, intentionally deconstructing the traditional messages that have been taught. And another part of that I think is really important is, I like this quote. It says, high expectations are the outward manifestation of somebody's belief and hope in you.
Wow.
And I tell my students that all the time. And sometimes they make fun of me. They say, we know the expectation is the expectation, but, empowering them to believe in themselves and to know that I believe in them and the people around them believe in them and stand with them and want to support them. We don't want to keep things the status quo. And unfortunately, education has to make some major changes to ensure that that's not what's happening, because what happens is the achievement gap that we've been talking about since, Brown versus Board, the achievement gap that we've been talking about is still there. It's just there differently. Segregation in schools just looks a little bit different, and they frame it a little more nicely now. But it's still there. The divide is very real. We're talking, disproportionality in discipline suspension, disproportionality in proficiency. So, and, education is a part of the system that we're talking about is problematic.
Right.
It's been a tool and function of that system. And so it needs to be completely restored as well.
Wow. Wow. Ashlyn, oh my gosh.
Oh
You
my
are
gosh.
like blowing my mind right now. Not saying because I knew I was like, Ashlyn is gonna be so solid when she's on this. Like I
Oh
literally,
my God.
I literally can't wait
I
for her
was
to come on.
nervous.
No, you like, but the things that you're opening our minds to things, because that's the thing, like, and you put it like you said it in the, and I'm not going to say it the right way, but it is, everything about racism is systemic, from education to housing to just, you know, even doctors and that, like everything is so systemic about it. And education is so huge because that's where the opportunities lie. And you know, the especially your whole point on how it's segregated still, but it doesn't look like segregation. Like it just shows again how swept under the rug things are, and just to keep people back. And it's just, it's mind boggling. And it's just, it's scary because it's like, how can we undo all the wrongs that have been done? But at the same time, it's like, it's so good to know that there are people like you and people like Brittany and people who are around who are recognizing like there's a problem here and I'm going to do what I can to fix it. Because it's one of those, it's every person putting their hand to the plow and just going for it. So I
And you know when you
appreciate you for
talked
that.
about one thing, I'm like psycho. You talked about we were talking about segregation, and I talked earlier about all the things you don't know and all of that. But this,
The Color of Law.
okay, talks just about segregation, residential segregation.
Wow.
Like, so people are asking for resources, people are asking, what do I do? Inform yourself. Because, and I'm the first one to say, there are things that, and that's part of white privilege that I've gone through my life. Like I talked about elementary school, middle school, high school, you don't even know the intentionality behind the oppression.
Mm.
When you read about it, when you hear about it, and this is that white fragility piece. Here I am saying, I can't believe this. Oh my gosh, there's all these things I didn't know. Every little nitty gritty detail that was so intentional to oppress, to exclude. And everybody else is sitting there saying, like, yeah, we live it, which is why it's our job as white people to inform and educate ourselves as to the reality, the actual reality, not the reality of whiteness that is America.
That's so true. And I think educating yourself is such a big thing. I mean, I as a black person, there's so many things that I'm reading up on now that I'm like, what? Like when I learned, because I didn't read The Color of Law, but I read Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria?
Yep.
And that kind of just gave like an entire like, it's just when you learn again what Ashley was saying, how intentional things have been to keep things segregated and to keep people marginalized. And it's like, oh my gosh, like it's like you can't, it's literally impossible. It can literally be impossible for someone to get out of where they're at. It's possible, but it's just there are so many barriers that have been put in place. And it's just, it's huge. It's huge. And thank you for sharing that book. And I know that you said you had a million other books. So if you want to like, actually, can you write them down and I will put them up as
Yeah.
like a resource list? Because I know a lot of people are like, where I need to know what to read. I need to know. And it looks like, I mean, I know you've got like a plethora of resources.
We have to do it. We have to be better. We have to do better. Like I say, at some point, ignorance is a choice. You know,
Right.
ignorance is a choice. There's too much information out there. There's there's too much out there for this to continue and for us to be silent about it.
It's so right. It's so true. Okay. I'm sorry. I know I'm gonna run out of time in like 5 minutes.
No, you're
so
I've like
so much I want
rambled
to
and
answer you, but I'm
rambled.
like, it's like almost 12 o'clock. So last question. What can you, let me think. Let me look at a good. I guess you've kind of answered this, but what is one resource that you would recommend to white people specifically, either a book, podcast, speaker, whatever that you feel would be helpful for them?
Definitely, I think for me, a great foundation was White Fragility. And you know what, like I went into that book thinking like, I'm not like some people, like I know some things, you know, and then I read that and you will read that and she will call you out. The preconceived ideas you didn't think you have, the just narratives you didn't think were there, she highlights, and she makes you more comfortable with being uncomfortable, and really changes like what your whole mindset should be when it comes to this work.
Right.
Instead of being defensive, be thankful. Instead of thinking be open and willing to learn. Like best starting point. And then other thing, and you watched it too, we got to plug again. Christine Kane hosted that conversation. I don't want to say interview. Right. It was a conversation with Dr. Anita Phillips, which I loved because she
was brilliant.
Is a clinical therapist, trauma therapist specifically, and a woman of faith. And I was saying to you, so often it's one or the other, you know, and she's both. And that was, it was awesome. It was one of the most powerful, profound conversations on the topic. So those are the two things to start: White Fragility, and Christine Kane. It's on her page, her interview with Dr. Phillips. And the other thing, just start. Like so often we wait. I'll do it then. I'll do it next week. I'm not ready. I don't know enough. I'm afraid. I don't know what I'm going to learn. I don't know what I'm going to hear. I don't want to deal with the feelings that it might bring up in me. Start.
Do it.
Do it.
The time has come. It has been enough time wasted.
Enough.
Ashlyn, you are just,
oh my God.
You are coming back. 1000% you're coming back.
You're gonna say, give me you got 10 minutes, Ashlyn. Answer the question.
I'll be like, come on, Ashlyn, you're on right now. 9:00, you're coming. You'll be like, what? I wasn't ready. And then you'll just be like, here are 19 books that you can read. All right. So thank you so much, Ashlyn. I'm actually going to get kicked off in a minute.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Ashlyn, for all of everything. Thank you to Mentha and Brittany and Tay and Kayasia and Ashlyn again. And it's just, we have so much to talk about, and this is not going to be the only time. So thank you guys for staying to the long haul. Have a great night. Love you all. Love you, Ashlyn.
Love you. Thank you, Imani.
And bye, everybody.